Different in many respects, to be sure, but similar in the crucial respect that their focus was political in nature and their platform consisted mainly of democratic principles and negative liberties. It was presumed that these were the most pressing matters and that economic issues would get worked out in due course. But what happened? To make a long and terribly complicated story short, shock capitalism happened. And it brought the kinds of dislocations, dispossessions, and disfigurations for which shock capitalism is so celebrated around the world. Because the democratic movements turned governments hadn't given much thought to questions of economic structure or policy, they were unprepared and ill-equipped to respond to the convulsions induced by neoliberalization. This should serve as a cautionary tale for Iran's democratic movement. Postponing the economic question, saving it for later, could be dangerous, because the economic default setting of the global system is some form of neoliberalism, which may or may not be what the Greens decide they want. But if they don't, they'd better get on the case, because it's what they'll end up with unless they deliberately steer clear of it and actively pursue an alternative path. This situation presents Iran with an extraordinary opportunity. It's not often that a society gets to rewire itself. Revolutions happen infrequently. And although the Green Movement's primary focus is political rather than economic, the possibility that it could, on the basis of its political demands and the political process it has set into motion, open the door for some kind of rewiring of the Iranian polity, could put the economic sphere up for grabs as well. Again, the Green Movement should imagine itself being in charge of these issues tomorrow if necessary. That means confronting head-on several major questions which all governments must face. Should Iran join the WTO? What policy on foreign direct investment would make the most sense? Can Iran learn from models other than the dominant neoliberal one? Or is it fated to merely take its place in the neoliberal global system? What might it learn from the social democratic model of another oil-rich state like Norway? What might it learn from Lula's Brazil or from the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela? Now, this last one gets really thorny because although I think there is, in fact, a good deal to be learned from the Venezuelan experience, many in Iran's democratic movement are so disgusted with the response of Hugo Chavez to Iran's June election and its aftermath, and to his enthusiasm for Ahmadinejad more generally, that unfortunately, but totally understandably, they aren't exactly open to learning from Chavez. Recall, for those of us who may have suppressed this unpleasant memory, the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry's denunciation of the Iranian street demonstrations in June, and I quote directly, "The Bolivarian government of Venezuela expresses its firm opposition to the vicious and unfounded campaign to discredit the institutions of the Islamic Republic of Iran, unleashed from outside, designed to roil the political climate of our brother country. From Venezuela, we denounce these acts of interference in the internal affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran, while demanding an immediate halt to the maneuvers to threaten and destabilize the Islamic Revolution." Unquote. The damage this has done to Chavez's standing among Iran's democratic forces cannot be overstated and may be permanent. But as much as Chavez has earned criticism on this point, there is nonetheless much to be learned from the Bolivarian experiment, and Iran's democratic movement would do well to take a close look at some of its achievements. As flawed as Chavez's judgment has been with respect to Iran's internal politics, to put it mildly, there are many aspects of Venezuela's attempt to construct an alternative to the neoliberal model that deserve careful study. I would encourage Iran's prospective future leaders from the Green Movement not to ignore the spectacularly bad faith Chavez has shown, but to bracket and examine Venezuela's economic experiment on its own terms. I would also, in a spirit of friendship and critical solidarity, suggest that the Green Movement engage, for example, David Schweikert's important work on economic democracy, or what he calls market socialism. A Persian translation of his book After Capitalism would certainly be in order, as would, say, a series of interviews with him on how his ideas might apply in the case of Iran with its particular features. Likewise, with the work of Amartya Sen and Joseph Stiglitz, why not see what they're saying about the current global economic order and elicit their advice on how Iran might chart a progressive economic course? How about the Mondragon cooperatives in the Basque Country? What lessons might they have to offer about the feasibility of worker self-management? And the participatory institutions that Brazilians have built. Not only the celebrated participatory budgeting in Porto Alegre and other Brazilian cities, but the health councils, the city master plans, and other experiments in bottom-up design and grassroots structures. Finally, Iran's Green Movement has itself offered a model of organization and social movement that others are beginning to study, and I believe will continue to study for many years to come, whatever the outcome of its quest. It has, from its inception, been an innovative and imaginative force in an open-ended and constant state of flux, building the road as it travels and reinventing itself at every turn. It is, for this reason, ideally suited to open-mindedly engaging with other models and movements around the world. It has always, from day one, been a bold and daring movement, so thinking big is in its very DNA. This might not be the optimal moment for Iran's Greens to undertake a detailed analysis of the economic experiments of Brazil, Venezuela, or Mondragon, or to engage the ideas of Schweikert, Sen, and Stiglitz. They have bigger fish to fry right now, engaged as they are in a life and death battle. I would nonetheless like to nudge Iran's Greens not to wait until it's too late. Thank you.